The problems facing New Zealand's primary sector have been mounting at a rapid pace. So I think it's time for open hearts and open minds.
Welcome to Sarah's Country, to our live viewers and of course our on-demand listeners across the multitudes of platforms that we stream to and broadcast on demand from 7 o'clock, kicking off Monday through Wednesday, whether you have the audio stream going right now through your phone from sarahscountry.com while you're on the tractor or out in the truck, or if you're listening to this show on demand on podcast at daybreak with the coffee steaming in the cup holder. I say kia ora and welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your very busy day to tune into this show that is growing so much. I just checked out those podcast stats, and we're in over 30,000 individual people that listen and tune in every week on podcasts alone. It absolutely blows me away from how far we've come. I've been thinking about that concept of being multi-things to multiple people today. You know, how career mothers, farming mothers, or students studying and working at the same time, or managing multiple farms, but being on multiple committees for your local community every night as well. We humans, and in particular Kiwis, love to stretch the boat out, don't we? To try and ensure all of our values boxes are ticked. And so the same goes for our role as farmers and growers, to have multifaceted reasons of why we get out of bed every day. For the multitudes of reasons we choose to farm and grow and support those that do. Our consumers also have multiple different reasons to demand from us, regardless of, based on what they know, not what is factually correct. And this is the environment that we all exist in every day and we need to continue forward into. I'm your host, Sirma Karapeeva, and it's my absolute pleasure to bring you this show in alliance with the great team at Farmers Weekly 3 nights a week, with our glorious guests across New Zealand's food and fibre sector, to bring a sense of realism, yet hope, a sense of practicality, yet without prejudice, and of course, hopefully a sense of calm to the storm. And if you are really enjoying this, please do not hesitate to get in touch with me, Sarah at sarahscountry.com, or of course into the DMs on social media, and let me know your ideas for topics and people. I want to hear from you. I certainly have on a daily basis people getting in touch, and we certainly execute and follow through on getting those guests on the show. And of course, I want to hear from you in the comments below tonight. You were a little quiet last night. That's okay. You know, I know it's daylight savings, and the consumption of how you're watching live or consuming on demand will change with daylight saving. And I do want to park politics. I love to talk about Labour weekend plans. Many of you may be just staying at home, getting on top of spring cleaning the house, and of course working through getting those crops in. But of course, if you are heading away, let's celebrate all the wonderful places that you're going. One of my favourite little gems of this beautiful country I'm heading off to is, of course, the Hawke's Bay. I love the Hawke's Bay, particularly its wine, and one of my favourite wineries that I've never been to a concert at, Black Barn, with a bit of Shapeshifter. Certainly really looking forward to spending the weekend with some fantastic friends from the Bay. I'd love to hear where you're heading off to. But I also want to let you into a little secret that one gentleman will be kicking off his Labour weekend tomorrow with a very special day. And I want to throw him under the bus by letting you know that tomorrow, this is Thursday, the 22nd of October, Dean Williamson from Farmers Weekly will be turning 60. So if you know Dean personally, I want you to get in touch and wish him a very happy birthday. If not, take the time in the comments below to say happy birthday, Dean, because we're talking there about being multiple things to multiple people. And what I've watched in the last 12 months from that gentleman, with of course the love and support of his wonderful wife Kushla and the team at Global HQ, is what an incredible human being to be able to grow the amazing business which Farmers Weekly has become. I'm nearly tearing up. So proud. Anyway, happy birthday from Sarah's Country team to Dean Williamson. And of course, tonight on the show, we have a wonderful lineup of guests, as always. After 7:20, I really enjoyed talking to Jeremy Baker. Now, Dan, the producer, he reckons that he's made up his own title because, of course, Chief Insight Officer for Beef+Lamb leads him down many paths into the future for our sheep and beef farmers here in New Zealand. And discussing the findings from the recent new season outlook 2020 to 2021 webinar happened yesterday, and things are not looking pretty. So I do want to find that silver lining with Jeremy amongst this COVID mess of the global markets. Then after 7:30, more gender equality is needed in the meat sector, says CEO for Meat Industry Association of New Zealand, Sirma Karapeeva. And to close the show, very cool, Tony Dobbs, South Canterbury farmer and blade shearer, will share his journey of becoming, wait for it, the first person in the world to win 100 open blade shearing finals. What an absolute legend. Tony will be with us after 7:40. But firstly, after this very short break and following today's conference at Lincoln about gene editing, Dr. David Penman says that we're getting this wrong in the debate. Let's stop talking about the process of gene engineering. Let's talk about the outcomes it can achieve for us globally, and particularly with climate change. This is Sarah's Country.
One of the first things you learn when you live out here
is where to shop for the things you need to live out here.
like electric fencing,
or horse feed,
or bee suits,
Children's
chook food.
Do you want a couple of these?
or something stylish to wear. Not everyone's got stuff like this.
But at Farmlands we do, and then some.
So if you need anything to help you farm,
grow,
Milk, drench,
Rear!
come on in.
because we're out here too.
Well, in a story for Farmers Weekly by Richard Rennie, following the New Zealand Agricultural and Horticulture Science Institute's conference held at Lincoln University on gene editing today, Dr. David Penman was the co-chair on the Society's investigating panel as well as the keynote. He suggests that there is too much focus on the processes behind the gene engineering rather than taking an outcome-based approach to what it could deliver. And Dr. David Penman joins us now. Welcome to Sarah's Country, David. A big day?
It has been a long day, but a very useful day.
I'm sure there would have been a lot of great discussion, which we will cover off. But firstly, can you start by sharing with our audience what your top-line messages were in that keynote to the audience today?
Well, you mentioned one of them is looking at the regulations and how we handle genetic modification. It's the definition of genetic modification is not well articulated. It's very complex legislation across different jurisdictions. We don't really know what a genetically modified human, for example, looks like, let alone plants and animals. So there's a definitional problem, and then there's a regulation problem that we're just constrained so much by the current settings. So the settings are essentially, it's a very precautionary. Yes, the regulations might allow some control release, but it's very expensive and very constraining because I said it's driven on what a process of genetic modification might be, rather than saying what's the risk of things we do on a product and an outcome. Are we trying to control wasps? Is that a good thing? What are the approaches to it? Are we trying to stop wilding pines? Can we do it? What are the risks? So you look at more an outcome place, or because one useful thing came up was a picture around the world of all the different regulations now that are saying gene editing, which is very precise, is a sort of, it's a modification, but it's very precise. And many countries are now saying some of that doesn't need regulation, you should do it. And we're very restrictive in saying you can't do it, it's constrained. So to me, that's the main message, is finding a way to have a dialogue and a discussion to allow us to look at different ways of doing things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm just likening it to the malaria debate with being able to genetically edit that. And then that moral discussion comes into it. And our regulation is becoming more and more populace focused. How do the likes of the agricultural, and horticultural scientists as a community who are so embedded in fact start to do a better PR job of this?
Well, that's what we discussed quite a bit, and so that 20 odd years ago we had the Genetic Modification Royal Commission, and that came off some very quite sound discussions, but implementation has not been so well done because it was a polarised debate, that one, and the world has moved on. One of the final questions was, how has the world changed in 20, 25 years? And my view is it's changed dramatically in terms of both the technology, which is very precise, and we're a much more diverse country. We've got a lot of different viewpoints. We've got some unique attributes here that we have to do it. So it's that sort of form of discussion which we've got to find a way to do, rather than the legal Royal Commission polarising things. How do you build a community of interest that understands, yes, there are some things that are high risk, some things are not, and maybe GM-free is no longer a realistic issue, because we have a lot of GM products already in the country and people don't always know it. GM canola, soybeans, we have them in our food chain. So how do you build a discussion saying, well, let's get a bit more nuanced, and particularly to pick up different views of different communities, and particularly strongly now pick up Maori treaty issues become part of it. So it's a different dialogue and requires different skills. So I wouldn't call it PR, I'd say engaging early in the debate rather than saying engaging at the end of the debate.
Well, the end of the debate really has happened. The horse has bolted with consumers in our global markets demanding a label that they can understand, which is GM-free. That's led to our regional councils here taking it on board themselves to build their provenance story around this, though, David.
They have, and I think that was one of the difficult issues, because the scientists never really spoke up in those council debates. They were driven from a particular viewpoint, and councillors were unable or unwilling to actually engage, my understanding is, scientists in saying, well, actually the risk is very low. There's issues raised about liability. Well, there's no evidence that current GM products anywhere in the world have caused significant harm that would lead to liability. So there's a whole lot of barriers like that. So it's trying to get a dialogue to say, well, a GM council thing is not really going to do much. It's symbolic, but it's also concerning to the science community. So we've got an environment now where we're trying to listen to scientists more with COVID. We've been proactive in doing it. Surely now's a chance to say we can't go on endless round and round circles about this gene editing, which is taking over the world. This is a river product. But I kept saying, it's not a silver bullet, but we must allow the technology to be fully researched so we can make decisions about risk and reward.
How do we engage earlier with the younger generation on this issue?
Well, the younger generation to me is the key. The panel I chaired and co-chaired, we took our report to some school groups, and they were just amazing. Young people, no, this GM, GE-free debate's not an issue for them. There's some big issues like climate change. And it's like, how can gene editing influence our approach to climate change and feeding populations, healthy living? So they said, we want to listen to the debate, tell us the opportunities, give us understanding of risks, and I'm sure that they need to lead the debate. That I've talked with some people in the 20-year ago anti-GE movement. I said, well, the world has moved on. The young people have got to drive this, and can you find the right level of young people who can use social media, etc., to drive the challenges? It won't be us oldies who've been around for a long time. So I'm optimistic that the young people coming through understand that this is just a technology. It's a tool, and like any tool, we've got to understand risks and benefits.
So it's about phrasing the conversation and bringing an outcome-based approach. But where is the leadership on this issue? We are following Saturday night's election, a Labour sole government who did not want to put their head above the pulpit with Greens in the last coalition on this issue because they feared they needed them to get back in. Now they don't. What do you believe may unfold?
Well, I guess we don't really know, but I hope that they will begin the discussions. Before it was just, we tried to get discussions going, so we're just not going there. Yes, politicians I spoke to early on understood, but said we're constrained by political restraints. Now, those restraints, in theory, have been somewhat removed. So I hope that they move to have a look at the regulations. That's the key part, is looking at sensible regulations, aligning particularly with Australia, because we're going to have, soon we'll have products we can't bring into Australia because they're now allowing gene editing at a level on the agricultural products. So soon they will be banned from coming into the country.
It must be getting frustrating, David, when one of the Nobel Prize winners for chemistry this year were the discoverers of the CRISPR technology.
Well, it was fantastic to have a Nobel Prize so early. It's really showing this is a transformational technology. But equally, we don't want to be seen to being absolute promoters of this technology above everything else. This is just yet another technology to add to our toolbox. That's a toolbox of conventional plant breeding, which is not part of a genetic modification, even though it is modifying genes. So we've got now a much more precise technology, and even the inventors of CRISPR are saying we use it with caution. It's a very powerful tool. We've got to be careful how we use it, and so far people are being careful. And we need to have the right regulations, the right societal support, the social licence to do it, and we need a New Zealand social licence to do these things. So therefore, engaging with communities early, not saying we as scientists know best, which is a risk in the past where scientists have done that, not very good at that, saying, well, but. And so engaging co-design of experiments, getting real evidence to make decisions. So we've got to be optimistic that something will change. And I think this meeting today will help the process, and we await the government's answers with interest.
I was going to ask you where to from here when you have, the New Zealand agricultural and horticultural science, the scientists all in one room. There could be a lot of sort of in-talking and going around in circles, but really action out of it. Was there any?
No, but it was more than just scientists. There were people from GE-free movements there as well. So it was more than just scientists talking to scientists. And scientists have very different views too, from coming from environmental perspective, a food, methane, climate change perspective. So I think realising the dialogue now has to be done. It's timely. All we need now is a signal from government to say, yes, we want to hear more what you do and then engage. But the form of engagement, is it going to be a widespread conversation, another Royal Commission or type of thing? What? But it's, at the moment, we believe the legislation is not fit for purpose. There are risks to it. So therefore, that should be the first point. Look at the regulations, the legislation, and then we'll see how we might engage populations.
Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. David Penman, following his keynote speech and, of course, co-chairing the panel there at the New Zealand Agricultural and Horticultural Institutes of Scientists conference, all focusing today at Lincoln University around the topic of gene editing and the future of it for New Zealand. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are in the comments wherever you are watching Serious Country live across multiple different platforms. What's your thoughts on gene editing? I'd love to know. It has been a polarising debate. How much do you know about it? And if so, what are some of the outcomes whereby this technology would enhance and improve your business and your ability to achieve some of these regulations, such as, of course, our ETS and climate change commitments and fresh water quality. Now, up next, we have Jeremy Baker. He is the Chief Insight Officer from Beef+Lamb New Zealand. And this is following yesterday's webinar on the new season outlook for 2020 to 21. It's not looking so rosy. So let's hope that Jeremy can find us a silver lining. This is Sarah's Country.
Delicious. Ever wondered where it starts? Does it start with care? Respect. Fresh grass 365 days a year. The truth is, delicious doesn't start in a single moment or with a single ingredient. Delicious starts here.
If you are watching live and you just saw that TV commercial from Silver Fern Farms and you haven't had dinner yet, I'm sure that your mouth is watering. It's stunning, stunning, beautiful photography, and of course the way that they put that food together. Oh, yum. No, every time I see that. There'll be no vegan challenges from me here. This is, of course, if you watch the AM show in Duncan Garner. Of course, I'm on the balanced diet approach. Now, Michael has said that genetic modification happens naturally. This is following our last guest, David Penman, Dr. David Penman, on gene editing. If we accelerate, modify it according to our own views, rather than natural survival, we must focus on the likely outcomes. As your guest suggests, he said, rather than the processes. Really enjoyed talking to Dr. David, and I know that conference today at Lincoln University would have had some very heated discussions with a bunch of agricultural and horticultural scientists, but as he said, there was all facets of stakeholders there with the likes of from the GE Free New Zealand movement as well. And I just want to touch on, welcome, kia ora, Mike Brown, who is listening to us from Virginia in the States. Now, I just did a little bit of Googling, as you do, Mike, and I understand it to be in the early hours of your morning there, so thank you so much for watching live. Mike, I want two things from you in the comments. Who's going to win the US election and why? And also, how did you find Sarah's Country? I'd love to know. Now, we'd like to keep open minds, open hearts, and optimism. That's my style here, but we do bring you the realism to make sure that you are armed with the best decision-making going forward for your farming and growing businesses, as well as those that you may support working in this sector. COVID-19 continues to cause uncertainty for our sheep and beef exports. And this is following Beef and Lamb's new season outlook webinar that happened yesterday. Both global economies and consumer demand and the trading channels have all been extremely disruptive, as well as the rise in nationalism. According to this report, the challenging environment is predicted to cause a decline over the next 2020 to 21 season in our export receipts. And Jeremy Baker, the Chief Insight Officer from Beef and Lamb, joins us now. Evening, Jeremy. I like talking to you about the future when it comes to optimism and innovation, but at the same time, realism is important.
Absolutely. It's really important that we at Beef and Lamb, and particularly through the Economic Service, provide our sheep and beef farmers and our dairy farmers with really good information about what's likely coming at them in the next season so that they can make the right decisions for their farming business. So that's why we put all of this effort in, gather a whole lot of information domestically and internationally, and put this report together. And this year we've put it together in a variety of formats to try and make it as accessible as possible. But the headline figures are simply that we are likely to see a drop in export receipts of about 15% for lamb, around 8% for other sheep meat products, and around 9% for veal and beef. So, that's the headline.
And with regards to, diving into the detail around it, how are these numbers stacking up in comparison to some of the previous recessions that we've seen? Say, let's go back as far as the early 80s.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously this is way better than the early 80s. The average farm profit before tax for a sheep and beef farm has actually jumped quite a number of orders of magnitude over the last 3 decades. So back in the 90s, it was around 44,000. In the early 2000s, it was 65,000, and in the last 10 years, it's been around 97 to 100,000. So we're actually predicting it's going to drop to around 115, which is down from a high last year, but it's still above the 5-year average. And so we've built quite a lot of resilience into the sheep and beef farming system in New Zealand and the dairy system, and I think that's really important when these kind of external shocks come at us.
And that's absolutely right. I remember when there was a 25% drop in the share market and overnight, and everyone freaked out. And my mother, she follows your RTV and Al Jazeera and a lot of international, and she said, but we've risen 4,000 since the GFC. So what's 25%? And when you've got a decline of the amount of sheep numbers since the early 90s, and then it is all about putting this in perspective, is it not?
It's absolutely about perspective. It's about what we've shifted away from is volume to value. So we now get a great deal more value out of each animal, and we're continuing to do that. The annoying thing, of course, is that what the COVID situation has done is it's knocked some of that premium top end off the restaurant trade, and that has actually definitely had an impact on the prices that we're seeing at the moment. And what's happening is that the processing companies are working, including with Beef and Lamb through the Taste for Your Nature brand, to actually find some alternative, particularly some premium retail options. We've started doing that in China. So we're obviously hopeful, but we have to be realistic about how quickly we can turn on those new opportunities.
Therefore,
lots of work to be done.
In your role as Chief Insight Officer, you'll always have a forward lens on where are those consumer trends in retail and particularly e-commerce that we can maximise our New Zealand brand?
Absolutely, that's really what's been working. We've been working on the sort of more direct sale partnering. We've partnered with several New Zealand meat companies in the US and now in China to actually build e-commerce platforms. It's the meat companies that are doing that, but Beef and Lamb is helping them with the marketing side of the activity, and then right back to the farm assurance program that gives the assurance to customers that they're actually getting the product that they're after. So that whole of value chain approach is really critical for us to actually build that premium direct to consumer sales channel.
What about our emerging markets? We often talk of BRIC. And the number in India as has constantly been a standout when it comes to our emerging markets. Is there so much a rise in nationalism and protectionism over Indian-type food in emerging markets as opposed to established markets?
Look, obviously, global trade risks, global nationalism is a risk, but there are also other factors. It's never one story. The other story, of course, is a real hunt for safe food and for premium products. In New Zealand right now, we've always had a really good reputation for safe food production, but we're really on the top of the world now as one of the few countries that's actually defeated a human virus, but we've also almost eradicated M. bovis. And that's a fantastic story in terms of our ability to control zoonotic diseases in our food system. So I think those stories counterweight the nationalism. And again, remember, we are a tiny part of the global food production system. So we don't need to access every single market all of the time and get, what we need is to get those premium consumers buying our product, and they're pretty choosy.
And how do we define that when we hang on the coattails of the big commodity swings globally?
That's right, and that's why we have to continue to build our direct-to-market, direct-to-consumer, direct-to-retail chain, particularly some of the smaller retail chains. And if you think about China, smaller retail chains are absolutely massive, but there are a lot of them. It's a really diversified market. And so are places in other countries that we're exploring, like Vietnam and those sorts of places, which are also doing very well in COVID, I should say. So that's really, really important. So it's a variety. There's no silver bullet. That story I talked to you about the increase in the farm profit before tax, that's been achieved by a lot of little individual gains in a lot of areas, and the same thing happens at the pricing and consumer end. It's a lot of little things. year after year, chipping away and making those gains.
Yeah, and I can just feel and hear the cynicism of those little taxes that will chip away at the wonderful work that farmers are doing as well.
Absolutely. So that is absolutely one of the strong messages that we're giving to the government in New Zealand is, look, there's all this global uncertainty. It's really challenging out there. If you want us to be part of the solution for getting New Zealand back to economic success, then you need to be really clear about getting rid of some of that uncertainty domestically. We're not opposed to sensible, clear, and fair regulation, but it's got to be all those three and not just a bunch of really unclear stuff that makes it uncertain for farmers and doesn't help them be really productive.
Oh, well said, Jeremy. Now, I would just want to turn to some lighter news. Labour weekend, some will be going away and enjoying domestic tourism around this country, heading to the beach, heading to the rivers and the lakes. A lot will be on farm, getting on top of the crops in the ground and, of course, the likes of docking in the North Island, etc. So in light of the fact, Jeremy, will you be getting away and having a bit of a break?
Absolutely. I'll be heading up to near Levin to Horticulture Beach. Wonderful, one of those wonderful West Coast beaches and having a lovely long weekend there. So really looking forward to that.
Oh, awesome. Have a wonderful time. Jeremy Baker
Thank you so much.
Is the Chief Insight Officer for Beef+Lamb New Zealand. If you've just joined us, kia ora and welcome to Sarah's Country. It's an absolute privilege and pleasure to have you tuning in from all around the world. I'm just going to double check. Is Mike written in? Mike Brown, he might have tuned out. He was tuning in from the US, and I see from Mike's profile, he even said tally ho, that he's a bit of a horse hunter, our Mike. I just wanted to see what Mike thought of the US election coming up. Only a couple of days, weeks away, and it's going to be an interesting one to follow. I'd love to know, Kiwis as well, what do you think about the US election and where it could swing? Or are you just absolutely sick of politics? I certainly do get over it. If we can just move on and put our head down and enjoy our family and friends and our communities, as we will be doing around this Labour weekend. I would absolutely love to hear what your plans are and where you're heading, or what projects you've got to get on top of around the farm, around the house. It's a great spring cleaning or setting up the veggie garden type weekend, isn't it? Now, of course, I mentioned yesterday, and I want to share it again today, it was International Rural Women Day on the 15th of October. And before we catch up with our next guest, it's very fitting that we play you out this video that Ravensdown put together to celebrate the beautiful rural women within our communities. This is Sarah's Country.
Working in the rural sector is awesome. It means I can help the farmers in my community achieve their farming goals.
I get to meet some great people, I get to go to some fantastic places, and I get to help farmers achieve their goals by helping them to farm smarter.
Proudly producing some of the most sustainable red meat protein in the world, all while taking the utmost care of our precious environment.
It makes me so happy. We get to export our beautiful meats, our beautiful wool fibres, not only to all around the world, but within New Zealand. And it's such a cool industry to be a part of.
To build strong and resilient businesses so that our whakapuna can thrive in the directions that they choose to head, and are proud of this beautiful country that we live in.
To me, working in the ag sector means connection. Everything we do is connected with the land, whether it be our families, our finances, our diversification projects, or our code of ethics. It comes with many challenges, responsibilities, and lots of learning, but also comes with reward, opportunity, fulfilment, and lots of pride. We wouldn't have it any other way.
Now, it has been reported by Gerald Pickard in this week's Farmers Weekly that the New Zealand meat industry says it is committed to getting more women employed in the meat sector. And this is after a new report showing they accounted for only 36% of the industry's global workforce. The Gender Representation in the Meat Sector 2020 report, commissioned by the organisation Meat Business Women, shows women are underrepresented at every level above junior positions. They hold only 14% of board-level director roles and just 5% of chief executive roles. Meat Industry Association Chief Executive is a female, Sirma Karapeeva, and joins us now. Good evening, Sirma. Welcome back to Sarah's Country. It's always lovely and a privilege to catch up with you. This particular report, is this a global report, not just New Zealand?
Yes, well, hi, Sarah, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share the findings of this very exciting and I would say timely report. Yes, it is a global report. Meat Business Women is a global network of professional women in the meat industry. It spans the United States, the UK, Ireland, Australia, and most recently New Zealand. We've just signed up as a territory partner with the network. And this is a global report because as far as we know, this is the first time that a study has been conducted to look at the gender representation in our meat industry, in the sectors across those 5 countries, and to start that conversation about diversity, about inclusion, and about changing the way we perceive the industry, we perceive the sector, and what that might mean for women that are looking to join the sector or looking to progress within the sector.
How do you make an incentive to join a heavily male-dominated industry which has had so many connotations around it for decades and generations?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. And I think it has to be around the scope of the roles that are currently offered or available within the industry. We have such a wide variety of roles. Obviously, there's a number of roles at the processing operational level, and then through every rung of the company or of the industry, there are roles that are interesting, attractive, and dynamic. There's HR roles, leadership roles, legal roles, marketing development, export roles, you name it. There's such a wide variety of very interesting roles. And one thing that I can say for sure is that the meat industry is a very dynamic and forever evolving industry with a lot of challenges that are global as well as domestic, and that keeps it interesting. So, you know, women or anyone, in fact, that is interested in a role within an industry that is dynamic, this is the place to come.
What do you think is driving the key reasons why we're not attracting people into the meat industry, women into the meat industry?
Well, I mean, as the report highlights, there are really 5 themes that have emerged. The first one we just talked about, the perception of what the meat industry is about. There seems to be a perception that it is just that menial, heavy physical labor involved in it. And while, of course, there are roles that touch on that, as I said, there's a wide variety of other roles that one can get into. There's also the fact that, also we touched on it a bit earlier, you know, it is the history of the industry is a particular history. And so gender representation hasn't always been on the agenda. And if it has been, it hasn't progressed very far up to discussion points. So, you know, that's something that clearly needs to be addressed. Then there is this notion of the broken career ladder. And, you know, when you look at the statistics and what they show, women are very well represented at those more junior operational levels. But as they move into, you know, first line management or second, third, fourth line management or executive, then suddenly their representation peters off and the roles disappear. And that, I guess, is a reflection of the fact that, you know, the way the roles are structured and the flexibility around the working environment are probably not well suited to women that are looking to balance work and life, particularly with family commitments, children, husbands, and you name it. And so there is this kind of mismatch between a really talented skills pool and then what the job or the way the jobs are sized and structured. And then I guess the other thing is the networking. You know, if you don't have really good role models that you can look up to within the industry, it's very hard to see yourself following in those footsteps and actively pursuing a career in the industry. So those are some of the themes that came out through the report. And for me personally, they resonate really well. And they also give us some really good, pointers in terms of what we can look to tweak or address to attract more women within the industry and to make it easier for women to progress through the careers and through the ranks.
What's the feedback of the leaders within the meat processing industry here in New Zealand to this report, who are traditionally male and their boards are traditionally made up of males?
Yeah, again, another very good question. And I've got a call in with the HR leaders of the large companies tomorrow to talk about the report and to talk about what we as a sector, as an industry, can do to address some of the concerns that have been raised by the report. But I think the timing of the report is really interesting and actually really good, because when you look at the impact of COVID, it has shown us that the traditional way of working doesn't have to be the only way of working. We can be more flexible. We can work different locations, virtually, in different sort of makeups and still be productive and still do a good job. So I think some of that perception about the roles and the way the jobs are structured, COVID has already shown us that there is an alternative. And if we are brave enough to embrace that alternative in a more sustainable way, then it shouldn't be an impediment. And likewise, the other thing that I keep thinking about, and this report has really raised with me, is that I'm sure that we have a sustained shortfall of labour that we can tap into for our sector. Well, here's a brilliant opportunity to tap into a very talented pool of people, women that are willing to step up and are interested in, progressing through careers and getting jobs and, contributing to their families' well-being and the community's well-being and the like. So I think, this is a great opportunity. The numbers probably don't look all that great, but putting that aside, this is really a great opportunity to take that as the starting point and then take concrete steps to look to address that.
Lastly, how much do meat industry leaders actually understand and focus on the percentage makeup of the consumers of our meat and that diversity of thinking within the meat industry, being more female, to be able to craft what we're delivering from paddock to plate in a way that the predominantly female consumer wants it delivered?
Well, I think more and more so, and particularly with the changes that COVID has required many companies to take in terms of how they put their products on the market. The food service, which is one of the big areas that we export into, has been heavily disrupted by COVID. And so companies more and more increasingly are focusing on that online sales or retail sales. And as you say, female consumers are the shoppers. They go out and purchase the weekly shop for the family, and they prepare the meal and so on and so forth. So I think, again, this is a great opportunity to shift the thinking and look at how can we target the needs and demands of that segment of society to make our product and our product offerings more attractive to everyday shoppers and family shoppers as well.
Absolutely. Hey, Sirma, thank you so much. I'd love to know, what plans do you have for the long weekend ahead? Are you going to have a bit of R&R?
Oh, look, I think it'll have to be a mix of R&R and helping my husband with the guttering. So
guttering?
DIY. Guttering, yeah, we've after a heavy winter with lots of rain in Wellington, and of course the awful Wellington heavy winds, guttering is suffering. So I have promised him that I will roll up my sleeves and help him replace the guttering. So
you're a good lady, and he's a very lucky man. There's Sirma Karapeeva there, a gutter clearer by weekend and CEO for Meat Industry Association, CEO. And I've got a few comments coming in around the election, and the different divides within families. Michael's just talking about their being very pro, and I think if anything that I am very fortunate about in this country is how centrist we are, as much as it does have its own consequences. But you look at the divide within the UK and the US and how extreme it is, and the violence around it, and the nasty stuff. We're really, really fortunate to live in such a beautiful country. And I think we do forget that sometimes, regardless of which way you swing and which way you voted, of course, in the weekend. But politics aside, I'm really looking forward to closing the show to very shortly after this very short break with Fairley farmer and world record holder, blade shearer Tony Dobbs. You won't want to miss this. This is Sarah's Country.
Growing a better world takes courage. It takes foresight and vision. It's about dreaming big, then being brave enough to follow that dream through. To create a world where food is plentiful, soils are healthy, and rivers run crystal clear. A world where we grow more with less, where livestock is tended to with care. Energy is friend, not foe, and waste is a valuable resource. This is the world you're already shaping through imagination, innovation, and determination. So as small steps become huge leaps, you move boldly forward. And Rabobank is there beside you to help grow a better world together.
Really pleased we got into this. Thanks for your help, Dave.
It's a good idea, honey. You reckon it'll come out? Cover it in talcum powder, leave it 10 minutes, you'll be fine. Good call, Dave.
Good call on getting those security cameras, Dave.
You call a new one yet?
Yeah, kind of.
When you've got decisions to make, we'll be there to help you make the right call.
I'd go for those ones, Bob. Yeah, good call.
Did you choose these?
Oh, you know.
For great advice and insurance, talk to FMG.
One of my favourite parts of the Farmers Weekly paper every week is the Newsmaker, where you get to hear that depth behind the characters that are around our beautiful country. And this week's Farmers Weekly, journalist Annie Scott delved into the story behind South Canterbury farmer Tony Dobbs. He has shorn so many sheep that a lack of recent practice barely seemed to matter in Waimate, as he became the first person in the world to win 100 open blade shearing finals. Incredible achievement. The win came on the second and last night of the 43rd Waimate Shears, the New Zealand Spring Championships, where he first competed in 1979. And Tony's on the line with us. Good evening, Tony. Thank you so much and congratulations.
Oh, thank you very much, Sarah. Yeah, no, it's great to get that little hurdle out of the way. Well, big hurdle, I should say, yeah.
And of course, it's one of those things. It's been a wee bit since you picked up the blades. How rusty were you?
Yeah, no, pretty rusty. Well, as you can imagine on the farm, it's just full steam this time of the year with lambing and, you know, calving going on, and, you know, still winter feed breaks the shift. And, yeah, I was hoping, or I had intent to do a wee bit of practice to get ready for it, but just didn't have the time. And, yeah, so she was cold turkey.
Is it a little bit like riding a bike, though? Once you get those blades back in your hand, you're back into it. And, of course, tell us about your competition as well. I mean, did they put up a hard task?
Yeah, like you said, it's a bit like riding a bike, but, I mean, you're a bit wobbly on the pedals, that's the only thing. And, yeah, but I just keep cool and keep that top 6 inches, you know, in the head department right, and, yeah, and I think it just helps you focus on what you're doing, you know, because you know you're not going to be able to keep up with the other lads, as they're buck rats and just concentrate on every blow or every part of the sheep that you're doing, and that helps you keep your job right and take the mind off the pain. Yeah.
Oh, at least you're honest, Tony. I mean, I absolutely admire your fitness and your tenacity. 100. But at the young and fit age of 58, and what drives you to be continuously involved in sport shearing? Is it the community around the sport?
Well, yeah, I suppose it's gang mentality, sorry, but I mean, it's not a bikie gang, it's a shearing gangs, and, I was involved with the shearing industry when I was young and enjoyed working in the shearing gangs because, I mean, it's like a big family in there, and if you're willing to fit in, there's a lot of enjoyment, in the camperway sheds and just meeting other guys from different areas, different walks of life, and then you get into the competition side of it. Well, that's another big family again, and I've got people from all over the world that I know as close friends, so it's sort of hard to step away from that, because every time you go to a competition, you're meeting a lot of people there, meeting new friends, and when I did knuckle for about 18 years, and during the 90s, I had a bit of a gap while my children were young, and I missed that camaraderie we had, and so when I did finally get talked into coming back, I just instantly got the disease again, and I was away. I just couldn't let it go.
How do you find balancing, say in those earlier years when you did make that decision because you had younger children, but as they got a bit older, doing the circuit as well as farming, that I admire?
Yeah, no, it's a big haul, and I mean, to be honest, you're halfway selfish to yourself to be there, and you're relying on a lot of people around you, family members to knuckle down and do those extra yards so you can actually get away for that weekend, or that Saturday or whenever the competition's on. And I'm probably pretty lucky. Most of mine are in say a 2 or 3 hour driving range from home, but every time I get into the New Zealand team and we fly to Australia or somewhere, you're away for a week, so I rely pretty heavily on the family at home to do my jobs for me and look after the farming operation. So
How do you also know, how I've always admired it as well in terms of that uneven competition between those that do it from a sport perspective and have day jobs throughout the week versus, of course, you've got contractors that are sitting pretty doing it every day in and out. The competition, how does it work in terms of that level playing field for fitness and skill?
Oh, well, you're all on the same level when you're front up, at the competition. There's no like wood chopping. There's no off the standing start. It's everybody's when it's go, and if you can't hack the heat in the kitchen, you just slowly go out the other end. But I mean, in the early heat, we're only on 3 and 4 sheep, and then when you get through to the final, you're either 5 or 6. So I mean, that's when it starts taking its toll on me. Like I've just got to really make sure my equipment's razor sharp, and that gives me my edge to stay up with those guys. And like at Waimate, I sharpened every sheep, which is probably costing me about 5 to 8 seconds, just to sharpen each time, and you times that by 5 sheep, there's 40 to 50 seconds, which is coming up to 2 points with lost in time points. So, but I go and keep my job hopefully better by doing that, and so that's how I, stay in the mix.
How do you feel that the sport and, of course, the art of shearing by blade is placed into the future?
It's probably going to be a bit of a struggle from now on in. There's not a lot of young ones coming into the industry like there was, say, 25 years ago, because, the modern shearing equipment we've got, on the market today, they got these combs called winter combs, which do an exceptionally good job, but not as good as what the blades would do in the high country areas. But, it comes down to efficiency, I suppose, at the end of the day. You can get a team of, say, 4 or 5 machine shearers on winter combs and sort of whipping out around 200 odd plus a day out the porthole. And, that's 5 shearers is 1,000 a day. That would take, say, 8 blade shearers. So, it's just efficiency, I suppose. And but I know we'll still keep certain parts of the high country will stay as blades as long as there's blade shearers to do the job, because as far as a storm that counts, a blade shorn sheep, it has to be really severe before you'll lose any, whereas, the machines, if one of these spring storms come in, even with a winter comb, the losses can be substantial, if the farmer isn't really on the case and making sure he can get as many into shelter as he can,
I actually do understand from that perspective, Tony. I remember the blade shearers coming into the Nevis when we were growing up as kids, and then, of course, growing up and travelling beyond the region like you do when you become a teenager and go to boarding school. And I thought these other sheep, these Romneys, they were naked. I couldn't understand it. So it does just become a part of your culture in the high country, and it certainly would be sad to lose the art of it. Hey, can I just say, and congratulations on behalf of our listeners and viewers from around the world. Thank you so much for coming on Sirma's Country to share your story, and everybody will be wanting to know, will you be going for 101?
Well, I'm going to the Canterbury show, or the Canterbury shearing part of the show that's going to be held at Marble Point on the 5th of November, so you never know, 101 might happen. We'll wait and see.
Everybody keep that focus on Mr. Tony Dobbs. They're joining us there from Fairlie, where he is farming. And if you'd missed it, he has created a world first. Wouldn't it be cool? I've always wondered if I was going to be a world first in something, what it would be. Tony is the first person in the world to win 100 open blade shearing finals, and he did that at the latest Waimate Shears New Zealand Spring Championships, and congratulations extended to him. That's all we have time for tonight on Sirma's Country. For those watching along, thank you so much for joining us on your beautiful balmy evening, well, that it is here in Canterbury, and I understand the weather has settled down around the country. Whatever you have planned for your Labour weekend, please stay safe, and I hope you have a wonderful time with your friends and family. And whatever you're choosing to do, whether it's at home, getting on top of the projects around the farm, around the house, of course, if you are travelling, enjoy the rest of your trip wherever you're heading. I'm off to Hawke's Bay. Can't wait. Absolutely love heading up there, and great people, great food, and it will be some great music with a bit of Shapeshifter. I'll be back in one piece on Tuesday evening following a long weekend here in New Zealand with Labour weekend. In the meantime, good night and go well. This is Sirma's Country.